at the bottom of our bed runner, so I want to go back and review just a little bit. This is what the finished bed runner is going to look like. I'm going to go to the vertical layout, and remember the reason that we did this vertical layout was because we wanted to emulate what it would be like if you were quilting a queen size quilt and you were chunking down the sides of this quilt. The bed runner would have certainly been easier to load horizontal the way that we did this way, but that would not have given you a good lesson on chunking. What I have done and where I am now is basically all of this that you see in red that is sewn is actually sewn on the bed runner. Where I am now is what you see on the quilt that is red should be what is sewn on your bed runner if you are chunking down the sides of the quilt. This that is black that I'm going to bring up and show you here and scroll in to see is what I have left if I were chunking down the entire bed runner. The quilt is all the way up on the quilting table. What I want to do now is sew this bottom border right here. I want to be able to put that in, because if I do that and I sew that first, it will keep this as straight as possible. Then I would be able to adjust these side repeats on both sides. Since they are 14.42 inches tall, that would give me a longer distance to be able to distribute whatever shrinkage I might have when I am chunking down the sides of the quilt. So in our opinion, it is always best to sew this bottom border first. We're going to set it up in bottom border and border corner with Creative Studio and let Creative Studio do the math for us in that. You will notice that this last block is not sewn. And the reason that we don't sew it is because if you sew all the way down and you sew these last sides and the block and the right side, that's going to have a tendency not to make your bottom border be straight. It may in fact give it a little bit of a wave. If we sew the bottom border first, then any fullness that we have, we can work up into this block right here. We will still do the left side first and the right side first on the borders to keep the side borders straight, and we will work the fullness into this block. This block is 12 inches by 12 inches on our mock-up, but whenever we do the actual quilting on the block, we will draw the boundary and place those patterns in there and be able to maybe steam out some of that fullness if we should have some. So let me go and set up the bottom border. If I go back to my top border quilt group, you will see that this is what it looks like. Remember, the blocks are in another quilt group. This is the top border, and I am down to this bottom part. When I tell Creative Studio to give me the border corner option, it is of course going to give me a new quilt group. So the quilt group will be blank and it will have me start back over with the bottom border. I will not be able to stay in this quilt group right here that our top border is in. I am still going to select the border corner in the same sequence. I'm going to select the corner. It's always the corner first, and I'm going to hold down the control key and I'm going to select the repeat. I'm going to left click on border corner. And sometimes when you have a lot of borders in a quilt, and I like that it gave me this, you see I've got border corner 9 and border corner 10 and top border. I've got all these different border corners in this particular project. You will not have this many in your project, likely because this is my working copy. But it may give you this option sometimes, or this parameter sometimes. So that's fine. I'm just going to type in bottom border. and hit OK. Left click on OK, and Creative Studio is going to open up the border corner setup box, which is exactly what we wanted it to do. Way up here at the top right, you're going to see this little bitty box, and next to it is an open box that says bottom. If I left click on that to say bottom border, the only thing that Creative Studio is going to do is change this diagram and flip it upside down and make it be a bottom border drawing. This white roll thing that you see right up here at the top of the diagram, that's supposed to be your pickup bar. That's what that indication means. This, of course, is your quilt underneath it, but that's supposed to be your pickup bar. This white part that's a little more difficult to see, that has the black ends on it, that is supposed to signify that that is your belly bar. When I left click on bottom, that schematic, that drawing is going to turn upside down. You will see that the top is a little gray here, and that's supposed to indicate that you have a quilt rolled up on that pickup bar, and the belly bar is supposed to look like you no longer have a lot of the quilt rolled up on the belly bar. You will see that it looks like a bottom border setup. Your star is still going to be in the upper left corner, and all of this wording is still exactly the same. You're going to click in the same spots, and I still will go as far up to the pickup bar as I can in my clicking. So let's click the bottom border out. Always also be sure that you have already basted your quilt in and made it as straight as you can make it before you ever left click on the border corner icon, because you can't go back and do that basting, so you want to do that first. Left click is up near the pickup bar, upper right, and I am clicking on that basting line because I know that my basting line is done with channel lock and it is straight. Bottom right, and again, if you click the wrong spot, then you're done. You have to start over. What you cannot see on the screen is my clicking points, and the reason that you cannot see that is because I have Auto View All unchecked, and so that's why you cannot see that. Let me bring it into focus for you so that you can see it. The upper left is going to be right back at that inner border seam at the pickup bar, over to the right side, and this time the clicking again is going to be right on that corner intersection, over to the left side, and when I click OK this time, it's going to put that bottom border in, and you see it brought it all back into focus. I'm going to enter my length of my quilt, and it will be the same length that I put in the very first one, even though everything is already quilted, because remember, this is what Creative Studio needs to be able to use the side of the patterns and be able to adjust those patterns symmetrically. So even though I am at the bottom of the quilt, I am still going to put that length in. I'm going to move my mouse to the left side, and it's going to place those patterns. You can see from this right side, I've got a little adjusting to do on these patterns on the left side, and that's okay. I can deal with that. It did put in the 2 repeats on both sides. I'm going to say okay, and I'm going to put my machine head right up here at where this pattern is in the other grouping. This grouping right here, I'm going to put my machine head right at this point, and I'm going to see if I got lucky enough that those patterns, the 2 repeats that Creative Studio put in, if they fit. I can still reach that point, and my machine head is at that point of the ending of that pattern coming down the left side. What this is going to show you as I scroll in is how much shrinkage I have in that pattern. My crosshair that is my vertical crosshair is a little bit difficult to see because it's on that boundary line, but that's not too bad. I can take these patterns and delete them, but since there's not that much shrinkage, let's change my grid to 1/2 inch. And these are adjustments that you're going to need to make. You see that? It's a little bit more than 1/2 inch. It's probably about 3/4 of an inch. So let's play with it just a minute. I'm going to take just these patterns and I am going to move them in because I am distributing that 1/2 inch between two patterns. The corner needs to stay what the corner is. But these two patterns, remember we talked about what the size of these patterns were? Whenever I take that 1/2 inch and distributing it, or 3/4 of an inch, I am taking that 3/4 of an inch and I'm spreading it out. If I take these two patterns from 1432, so that's going between two repeats, and that's really going to camouflage that 3/4 of an inch and not show very much difference between the two. You can see that this pattern starts sewing up here on the right and goes around the bottom and up the left side. Borders are done in a clockwise motion. The top sews from left to right. The right side goes from top to bottom. The bottom goes from right to left, and then the left side goes from bottom to top. We talked about that a little bit. You can always select this pattern right here, and you can do order join, and Creative Studio will reverse the stitching of this entire grouping of pattern, and it would sew left all the way around to right. If you are chunking down this quilt, which is what we are showing, I would also put the machine head at this point. Let me switch to F11, this point right here, to make sure that those patterns are fitting and that they're going to end in the correct spot. You will have a little bit of shrinkage going around here, but if you slow this machine down as you come up, whichever side you choose to stitch last, if you slow it down, then that machine is going to slow down and you can make sure that you get that stitch correctly. I'm going to look at my patterns. I don't like this one right here. He needs to go up a little bit, so I'm going to hold down my Alt key and I'm going to tap on my up arrow and I'm going to move that pattern up a little bit. Creative Studio is placing that symmetrically, and I am at F11, so I'm going to turn on my end snap and snap that pattern just like that. I like the fact that these are more symmetrical going across there. Now I'm going to do F9 and hold down my Alt key, and I'm going to move them up ever so slightly. I'm going to take this pattern and I'm going to go to Nodes, and I have my end snap still on, so I'm going to snap that one. I'm going to hover over this last node and I'm going to snap that one, and you can see just how easy it is to make those patterns fit. I'm not real crazy about this one right here, so let's work on it a little bit. This whole pattern on this side, to me, needs to be squished in just a little bit. So I'm going to go to my F10 handles. Thank you. And I'm going to gently pull these patterns in just that little bit. This little bit of adjusting that I'm doing is really not going to show very much whenever you get the quilt off, but you can see that I have a teal marker, and because I have a teal marker, that means that these patterns no longer connect. So let's select this one. Once again, go to nodes. End snap is still on, so I have snapped that one. Now this one needs to have the blue node adjusted, so I'm going to hold down my left mouse button. Watch what happens. You see that turn into a straight line? You see this pink dot right up here at the top? Because I still have snaps on, it snapped that blue node to that end snap, which is what caused that line to be straight, and that is not what I want. So I'm going to hit the S on my keyboard while my left mouse button is still held down, and that will put that end snap back off of that ending pattern. I can slide this blue node and slide it up just a little bit. See, what I'm doing is adjusting this curve to still be a nice curve, but I am taking it inside of my boundary line. If I turn off my crosshairs by selecting the letter C on my keyboard, that is your shortcut to be able to do that. I can select this pattern again, and I can go back to nodes. My snap is off, and I am hovering over that pink node, and I am using my left mouse button held down, and in just doing that, you see how I have moved that up just ever so slightly? It's really easy to do. So now, once I adjust the patterns on this side, I'm going to be ready to quilt this one out, and the bottom border will then be done. Once you get that bottom border done, roll your quilt back to where you can get to this block easily. One point I want to mention is that I really like the fact that whenever you draw that X boundary to be able to center that patterns, one of the great things about this pattern right here is it's really easy to see where these little oblong pearls are, and to be able to place them to where they fit that X perfectly, and that way you know you have them lined up with the corners. So good job, Joyce, on that one. With that boundary selected for the X, I'm going to delete that for a better visual, and then I'm going to sew this pattern, and once this pattern is sewn, I'm going to place that crosshatch pattern again and make sure that it goes in those boundaries exactly the way I need it to be, and in those corners exactly the way I need it to go. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to go to my F9 handles and pull that pattern a little closer to that right side boundary. Pull the bottom of it down just a little bit, and you can see that my boundary is a little bit skewed, so I would carefully use F12 and tweak that pattern until it stays inside that boundary the way that I want it to. And the reason that I say carefully is because these are straight lines, and you do not want to skew these straight lines and have them come up as jagged. Checking these bottom corners, I'm pretty happy with where that one lands, and I am pretty happy with where that one lands. I'm going to pull this side down just a little bit, and whenever it gets to this bottom boundary, I may lean on it just a little bit to make sure that this point goes exactly to that boundary, because remember, I clicked out this boundary before I sewed this block. So rather than have these points exactly touch on that side, I'm going to just lean just a little bit whenever I get to that point and slow the stitching down a little bit when I get to that point. So I'm going to quilt this one out, and then we'll do the other side border.